For centuries, the teachings of Jesus have been the foundation of one of the world's largest religions. However, there are indications that not everything he taught was widely disseminated. What if part of his message was reserved only for an intimate circle of followers, shielded from the reach of the masses and preserved as a sacred secret? This idea is not only fascinating, but also supported by intriguing clues in religious, historical, and apocryphal texts. The canonical Gospels, such as those of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, form the basis of the New Testament and present the public teachings of Christ. However, even in them, we find passages that suggest the existence of private instructions, intended only for a select group. For example, in Matthew 13:11, Jesus says, "To you it has been given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not." These words raise the hypothesis that certain mysteries were deliberately concealed from the general public. In addition to the canonical texts, the apocryphal Gospels, writings that were left out of the official Bible, further expand this theory. Texts such as the Gospel of Thomas present Jesus speaking of an inner search and deep spiritual truths, often different from traditional doctrines. For many scholars, these passages suggest that there was a more esoteric layer to Christ's teaching, accessible only to those willing to seek beyond the religious conventions of the time. What would lead Jesus to conceal certain messages? Part of the answer may lie in the historical circumstances of his time. First-century Palestine was a land of political turbulence and oppression under Roman rule. An openly revolutionary speech or a message challenging the established order could put both Jesus' life and that of his followers at risk. Therefore, it is possible that he chose to share certain teachings privately, avoiding unnecessary confrontations. There is also the possibility that these messages required spiritual maturity to be understood. Many mystics throughout history have spoken about the need for inner preparation to receive higher truths. In this context, the reserved teachings could be a kind of initiation, offering insights that could only be fully appreciated by those ready to understand. The idea of secret teachings is not exclusive to Christianity. Various spiritual traditions, such as those of Pythagoras, the Essenes, and the Eastern mystics, employed similar methods. These schools often conveyed their deepest teachings only to chosen disciples, preserving secrets they believed to be too powerful to be widely disseminated. But how can we be sure that this happened in Christianity? The first centuries after Jesus' death were marked by an impressive diversity of beliefs and practices. Small Christian communities interpreted his message in radically different ways, and some of these interpretations seemed to focus on hidden knowledge. The so-called mysteries of the kingdom of heaven may have been shared with these communities as a way to preserve the spiritual essence of what Jesus taught. The transition between public and private teachings can also be seen in how Jesus chose his apostles. Although he preached to crowds, there are reports that he spent more time with the 12, teaching them privately and preparing them for specific missions. Within this restricted group, there may have been even more intimate levels of instruction, as suggested by traditions about Peter, John, and Mary Magdalene. As the story progressed, these supposed private messages were threatened with extinction. The institutionalization of Christianity, especially after the 4th century, led to the creation of an orthodoxy that marginalized many alternative ideas. However, these stories never completely disappeared. They survived in apocryphal texts, in Gnostic traditions, and more recently, in discoveries such as the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library. The mystery surrounding these hidden teachings is, therefore, both a historical and spiritual issue. Why were these messages concealed? And more importantly, what do they contain that could transform our view of Christ and his mission? This is the enigma we will explore in the following sections, diving deeply into the stories, texts, and figures that have preserved these secrets over the centuries. The apocryphal Gospels are a gateway to a world of ideas and narratives that challenge the traditional understanding of Christianity. These texts, often suppressed or forgotten, offer an alternative perspective on Jesus' teachings and the role of his followers. But what exactly are these Gospels, and why were they excluded from the official canon? The word apocryphal means hidden or concealed, and the Gospels with this designation are essentially accounts not included in the official Bible, established by the early church in the 4th century. These texts were written by different Christian communities, each offering their interpretation of Christ's teachings. Among the most well-known are the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, and the Gospel of Judas. They not only challenge the traditional narrative, but also suggest that Jesus' teachings could contain layers of meaning intended only for a more selective audience. The Gospel of Thomas, for example, is a collection of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, many of which do not appear in the canonical Gospels. The tone of the text is deeply introspective, emphasizing self-knowledge as the path to salvation. In one of its most intriguing passages, Jesus says, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." This view contrasts with institutionalized Christianity, which often emphasizes external faith and the authority of the Church. Another fascinating text is the Gospel of Mary, which highlights Mary Magdalene as a central figure in the community of Christ's disciples. In this Gospel, Mary is portrayed as Jesus' closest confidant, receiving spiritual teachings that the other disciples did not fully understand. This emphasis on Mary's role as a spiritual leader challenged the patriarchal norms of the Church, possibly explaining why the text was marginalized. However, its message of equality and the pursuit of inner wisdom deeply resonates with many people to this day. The Gospel of Judas offers a completely different perspective on the disciple often considered the traitor. Instead of portraying Judas as the villain of the story, this text suggests that he played an essential and predestined role in Jesus' plan. Judas, according to the Gospel that bears his name, would be the only disciple who truly understood Christ's spiritual mission, accepting his responsibility as part of a divine design. This view subverts the traditional narrative and makes us question how history is shaped by those who tell it. But why were these texts rejected? The answer is rooted in the efforts of the early church to establish a uniform doctrine. In the first centuries of Christianity, there was a rich diversity of beliefs and practices. Communities scattered throughout the Roman Empire developed their own interpretations of Jesus' message, often significantly diverging from each other. As the Church consolidated itself as an institution, the need for a coherent narrative led to the exclusion of texts considered heretical or conflicting with the dominant view. The Council of Nicaea, in 325 AD, played a pivotal role in this process. Under Emperor Constantine, church leaders gathered to decide which texts and doctrines would be officially accepted. Gospels that emphasized self-knowledge, individual spirituality, or ideas contrary to the central authority were discarded. This exclusion, however, was not the end of these texts. Many were preserved by dissenting communities, such as the Gnostics, and rediscovered centuries later. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi library in 1945 shed light on the richness of these forgotten traditions. Hidden by Egyptian monks in the 4th century, these manuscripts reveal a vibrant and diverse Christianity, where the pursuit of spiritual knowledge was central. These unearthed texts included the Gospel of Thomas and other Gnostic writings, bringing to light a lost dimension of Christ's message. Studying the apocryphal Gospels is not just a historical exercise, but also a spiritual journey. They challenge us to reconsider what we know about Jesus and the depth of his teachings. Perhaps, as these texts suggest, the true message of Christ is not something that we can find only in institutions or traditions, but rather something to be discovered within ourselves. While exploring these voices of silence, we are led to reflect on how power and politics have shaped the history of spirituality. These Gospels offer an alternative to the official narrative, an invitation to delve into mysteries that still inspire curiosity and introspection today. In the next part, we will analyze a group that may have been a crucial link between Jesus' secret teachings and the spiritual traditions that preserved them, the Essenes. Among the many communities that existed during the time of Jesus, the Essenes stand out as a group shrouded in mystery. Historical accounts describe them as a Jewish sect that sought a life of spiritual purity and communion with God, removed from the chaos of society. But what directly links them to Jesus and the possible existence of hidden disciples? The answer may lie in their philosophy, their practices, and the parallels between their teachings and those of Christ. The Essenes were known for their communal life and strict discipline. They inhabited regions such as Qumran, near the Dead Sea, where it is believed they produced the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. These texts reveal a worldview that emphasized preparation for the end of times, a divine kingdom that would transform reality. This idea resonates deeply with Jesus' message about the kingdom of God, suggesting that his words may have been influenced in part by this community. One of the striking characteristics of the Essenes was their dedication to the study and preservation of sacred texts. They viewed knowledge as something sacred, reserved for those who sincerely sought the truth. Similarly, there are indications that Jesus shared deeper teachings only with specific disciples, as mentioned in various biblical passages. This selective approach may have been inspired by Essene practices, who believed that certain mysteries could only be revealed to those who were spiritually ready. Another point of connection lies in the emphasis that both the Essenes and Jesus placed on inner purity. While the Jewish society of the time focused on external rituals, the Essenes preached that true purity came from the heart. This idea resonates in Jesus' words, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." Matthew 5:8. The convergence of these messages suggests that Jesus may have shared with the Essenes a vision of deeply transformative spirituality. Furthermore, the Essenes were known for their simple lifestyle and their rejection of materialism. They believed in the sharing of goods and in a life dedicated to meditation and communion with the divine. Many accounts of the life of Jesus and his disciples indicate similar practices, such as the sharing of food and the absence of material attachments. These parallels raise the possibility that Jesus, at some point, may have had direct contact with this community, or at least have been influenced by their values. There is also the matter of purification rituals. The Essenes conducted frequent ritual baths as a symbol of spiritual rebirth, something that finds parallel in the baptism practiced by John the Baptist, which many scholars believe to have been associated with the Essenes. If John the Baptist was part of this group, his relationship with Jesus could have served as a conduit to transmit Essene teachings to the early Christian movement. However, the connections between Jesus and the Essenes are not limited to practices. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain references to a messianic figure, a master of righteousness, who would lead the community during a time of great spiritual transformation. Although Jesus has never been directly identified as this master in the texts, the similarities between his mission and the Essene messianic ideals are undeniable. This raises the hypothesis that he could have been seen, by some, as the fulfillment of the Essene prophecies. It is also important to highlight that the Essenes had a dualistic view of the world, dividing everything into light and darkness, good and evil. This dichotomy appears significantly in Jesus' teachings, especially in his parables about the final judgment and the separation between sheep and goats, or wheat and tares. Such themes may reflect an Essene influence on his message, adapted for a broader audience. Despite these connections, it's crucial to remember that Jesus was a reformer, not a passive follower of any tradition. He transcended the limitations of the sects of his time, including the Essenes, and brought a message that was both universal and deeply personal. His ability to integrate ideas from different spiritual streams and adapt them to reach all levels of understanding is what makes him such a unique figure. If there were hidden disciples, it's possible that some of them had roots in the Essene tradition. Perhaps they were members of this community who felt called to follow Jesus, seeing in him the fulfillment of the promises they were waiting for. If so, the Essenes may have been the initial guardians of teachings that would later become the basis of deep and secret spiritual practices. The Essenes, with their focus on purity, sacred knowledge, and preparation for the coming of the kingdom of God, represent a fascinating link between the Jewish tradition and the emerging Christian movement. Their practices and beliefs echo in Jesus' teachings, raising important questions about the roots and spread of his message. In the next part, we will dive into the role of Mary Magdalene, a controversial figure who many believe to have been a crucial guardian of these hidden teachings. Mary Magdalene, one of the most enigmatic and fascinating figures in Christianity, has been the subject of debates and interpretations for centuries. Far beyond the traditional image of a repentant follower, there are indications that she played a much deeper role in the life and teachings of Jesus. For some, Mary was not only a close disciple, but also a guardian of hidden wisdoms transmitted by Christ. In the canonical Gospels, Mary Magdalene is mentioned as a key witness to the crucifixion, the burial, and above all, the resurrection of Jesus. In John 20:16-18, she is the first person to see the resurrected Jesus and is given the task of announcing the news to the apostles, earning the title of Apostle of the Apostles. This unique position suggests that Mary had a special connection with Jesus, a relationship of trust that went beyond what could be expected from an ordinary follower. However, the apocryphal Gospels, such as the Gospel of Mary, offer an even richer and more complex view of her role. In this text, Mary Magdalene appears as a disciple who deeply understood Jesus' spiritual teachings, in contrast to the other disciples, who often seem confused or unsure. In a significant passage, Peter questions why Jesus would have entrusted Mary with special revelations. Mary's response is a powerful affirmation of her closeness to Christ and her spiritual authority, standing out as a central figure in preserving his messages. The Gospel of Mary also addresses teachings that go beyond traditional doctrine, focusing on inner search and overcoming fear and ignorance as paths to salvation. This emphasis on self-knowledge and inner wisdom reflects the possibility that Mary Magdalene may have received a level of esoteric instruction from Jesus. Her presence as the main interlocutor in these apocryphal texts suggests that she was seen as the guardian of a wisdom that was not intended for the masses. The connection between Maria and the hidden teachings of Jesus is not just spiritual, but also symbolic. She represents the integration of the sacred feminine and the divine, an idea that was marginalized as institutionalized Christianity began to emphasize male authority figures. This marginalization, however, was unable to completely erase the legacy of Mary Magdalene. Her name and her story continue to arouse curiosity and inspiration in people seeking a deeper connection with Christ's message. Another apocryphal text, the Gospel of Philip, further reinforces the importance of Mary. It describes the relationship between Mary and Jesus in an intimate way, referring to her as Christ's companion. Although this word has been the subject of intense discussions, many scholars believe that it implies a profound spiritual partnership. This text also suggests that Mary understood aspects of Jesus' teachings that the other disciples were not able to grasp, making her a bridge between the spiritual mysteries and the rest of the community. In addition to the texts, recent archaeological discoveries have also reignited interest in the role of Mary Magdalene. In the south of France, for example, there are traditions that associate Mary with the spread of Christianity in regions such as Provence. Some legends say that she brought with her secret knowledge, preserving Christ's teachings in more restricted circles. Although these stories cannot be historically proven, they reflect the enduring perception that Mary was more than just a follower. What makes Mary Magdalene so fascinating is her resilience as a spiritual leadership figure, even in the face of centuries of misrepresentation. During the Middle Ages, her image was distorted to portray her as a repentant sinner, a narrative that served to diminish her spiritual authority. This misguided interpretation only began to be significantly challenged in the last centuries, with the rediscovery of apocryphal texts and a renewed interest in her true identity. For many, Maria represents a transformative force that transcends the limitations of institutional religion. She reminds us that spirituality is a personal journey, and that self-knowledge is a fundamental aspect for any quest for truth. Her story also challenges the patriarchal conventions of the Church, making room for the inclusion of female voices in spiritual leadership and in understanding Christ's teachings. If, as some texts suggest, Mary Magdalene was a guardian of Jesus' secret teachings, this places her figure at the heart of an even greater mystery. Who else could have received these teachings? Were they shared with other hidden disciples, or preserved by Mary alone? And what is the impact of these teachings on modern spirituality? Mary Magdalene is not just a historical figure or a disciple of Jesus. She is a symbol of resistance, wisdom, and connection with the divine. Her role as the guardian of potential hidden teachings opens doors to a deeper understanding of Christ and his message. In the next section, we will explore a specific text that exemplifies these mysteries, the Gospel of Thomas, one of the most intriguing records of Jesus' secret sayings. Among the apocryphal texts that challenge our understanding of Christianity, the Gospel of Thomas holds a special place. Discovered in 1945 as part of the Nag Hammadi library, this Gospel is not a narrative like the canonical ones. It consists of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, many of which offer a deeply introspective and esoteric insight into spirituality. But what makes this text so different, and why is it seen as a key piece in the mysteries of Christ's hidden teachings? Right at its opening, the Gospel of Thomas presents an intriguing statement. These are the secret words that the living Jesus spoke, and Didymos Judas Thomas wrote. The mention of secret words indicates that the text was not intended for everyone, but for a specific audience, prepared to understand deeper spiritual truths. This introduction alone already places the Gospel of Thomas in a unique position, suggesting a layer of knowledge that transcends the public teachings of Jesus. One of the central themes of this Gospel is self-knowledge as the path to enlightenment. In one of the most famous passages, Jesus says, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." This emphasis on inner search contrasts with the focus on external rituals and institutional obedience often associated with traditional Christianity. Here the message is clear. Salvation is not something imposed from outside, but an achievement that comes from within. Another notable aspect of the Gospel of Thomas is its apparent rejection of external authority, including religious structures and figures of power. In various passages, Jesus challenges the idea that the kingdom of God is somewhere distant or depends on human mediators. Instead, he asserts, "The kingdom of God is within you and outside of you. When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father." This message places spiritual responsibility directly in the hands of the individual, an idea that resonates in many mystical traditions throughout history. Although the text does not directly mention hidden disciples, its esoteric nature suggests that it could have been intended for a select group of followers. The enigmatic language and deep metaphors require a level of interpretation that not everyone could achieve. This raises the hypothesis that the Gospel of Thomas may have been a sort of manual for those seeking a deeper understanding of Christ's message. Some passages from the Gospel of Thomas also seem to challenge traditional notions about Jesus. In one notable saying, he states, "I am the light that is over all. I am the all. The all came from me, and the all has arrived at me. Split a piece of wood, and there I am. Lift the stone, and you will find me there." This view of an omnipresent Jesus inseparable from the physical universe is radically different from the traditional image of a Messiah separate from creation. For many scholars, this passage suggests a connection with broader philosophical and spiritual currents, including Gnosticism. Gnosticism, which flourished in the early centuries of Christianity, shared many of the ideas present in the Gospel of Thomas. It emphasized the pursuit of spiritual knowledge, or gnosis, as the path to transcend the material world and achieve union with the divine. Many Gnostics considered the Gospel of Thomas a central text, believing that it contained Jesus' highest teachings, intended only for the initiated. The rejection of this text by the early church is revealing. During the process of consolidating Christian doctrine, the Gospel of Thomas was considered dangerous because it challenged central authority and promoted individualistic spirituality. Its exclusion from the canon reflects the struggle for control of the Christian narrative and for defining which teachings would be considered official. The discovery of the Gospel of Thomas in Nag Hammadi was a milestone for the study of early Christianity. It opened a window to a world of ideas and practices that had been suppressed for centuries. For many, this text is a reminder that Jesus' message was broader and deeper than the institutionalized tradition allowed us to believe. Although the Gospel of Thomas was written in a specific historical context, its messages resonate powerfully in modern spirituality. It invites us to seek within ourselves the answers to life's mysteries, to challenge conventions, and to recognize our intrinsic connection with the divine. This perspective not only enriches our understanding of Jesus, but it also provides us with a transformative insight into what it means to live authentically and enlightened. With its emphasis on self-knowledge, spiritual freedom, and direct connection with God, the Gospel of Thomas continues to be a source of inspiration and contemplation for those seeking a deeper spirituality. In the next part, we will explore how the early church dealt with these alternative teachings and the conflicts that arose in the struggle for the definition of Christianity. As Christianity expanded in the early centuries, a silent and crucial battle was underway: the struggle for the definition of its doctrine. This dispute was not only theological, but also political, involving control over which teachings would be recognized as official and which would be condemned as heretical. At the center of this conflict were texts such as the Gospel of Thomas, Gnostic ideas, and the esoteric traditions attributed to Jesus and his hidden disciples. In the first century, Christianity was a fragmented religion. Communities scattered across various regions of the Roman Empire had varied interpretations of Christ's teachings. Some of these communities followed the Gospels we know today, while others leaned on apocryphal texts that emphasized inner search and secret knowledge. This diversity created a mosaic of beliefs that, for many, reflected the richness of Jesus' message, but for others, represented a risk of division. Starting from the 2nd century, Christian leaders began to emphasize the need for doctrinal unity. To achieve this, they needed to decide which texts and teachings represented the true message of Christ. The selection process culminated in the formation of the biblical canon, a set of scriptures considered authentic and inspired by God. Texts that did not align with this view were classified as heretical and were often destroyed or suppressed. The Council of Nicaea, held in 325 AD under the leadership of Emperor Constantine, was a milestone in this consolidation process. Although the council did not directly define the biblical canon, it symbolized the Church's effort to establish an orthodoxy, excluding ideas that challenged its central authority. Doctrines that emphasized self-knowledge or individual spirituality, such as those found in the Gospel of Thomas and other Gnostic texts, were seen as threats to the stability of the institution. The exclusion of apocryphal texts and alternative traditions was accompanied by a vigorous campaign against so-called heretics. Gnosticism in particular became a central target. For the Gnostics, salvation was not obtained through faith in rituals or the authority of the Church, but through inner knowledge and direct connection with the divine. This view challenged the intermediary role of the institution and its leaders, which explained their systematic persecution. The conflict also involved the issue of access to spiritual knowledge. While Gnostics and other esoteric traditions believed that certain teachings were intended only for initiates, the early church argued that Christ's message should be universal. However, this universality came with a condition: the control of content and interpretation by the institution. Texts and ideas that did not conform to this interpretation were eliminated or discredited. This doctrinal centralization did not occur without resistance. Dissident groups continued to preserve apocryphal texts and alternative teachings, often in secret. The Nag Hammadi Library, discovered in 1945, is a testament to this effort. These manuscripts, buried by Egyptian monks in the 4th century, contain a vast collection of Gnostic and apocryphal texts, including the Gospel of Thomas. They represent an attempt to preserve ideas that the official church tried to erase. Among the suppressed texts were not only Gospels but also commentaries, hymns, and philosophical treatises that explored the mysteries of Christian spirituality. These writings often presented a broader and more universalist view of Christ, portraying him as a wisdom teacher who transcends cultural and religious boundaries. This perspective, while inspiring for many, was seen as a threat to the forming Christian orthodoxy. Another point of tension was the emphasis on the role of the individual in the spiritual quest. Gnostic and apocryphal texts often encouraged believers to seek the truth for themselves, rather than relying on religious intermediaries. This approach contrasted with the hierarchy established by the Church, which placed bishops, priests, and rituals at the center of the spiritual experience. The independence promoted by these texts was, for the Church leaders, a direct challenge to their authority. The outcome of this conflict was a polarization that defined the course of Christianity for the following centuries. On one side, the official Church consolidated its power, creating a singular narrative about the life and teachings of Jesus. On the other, alternative traditions were marginalized, forcing their followers to hide or adapt their practices to survive. Although this struggle resulted in the exclusion of many ideas and texts, it also demonstrated the depth and complexity of early Christianity. The diversity of thoughts reflects the transformative impact of Jesus and the variety of ways in which his message was interpreted and lived. The hidden teachings, far from being mere historical curiosities, offer valuable insights into spirituality and the quest for the divine. Today, apocryphal texts and esoteric traditions are being rediscovered and reevaluated. They remind us that spirituality is a multifaceted journey, and that the quest for knowledge and truth transcends the limitations imposed by any institution. In the next part, we will explore one of the most influential traditions that preserved this quest: Gnosticism and its mysteries. The Gnostic mysteries represent one of the most fascinating spiritual traditions that emerged from early Christianity. Gnosticism, which derives from the Greek term gnosis, or knowledge, was not just a theological doctrine, but a path of self-discovery and enlightenment. For the Gnostics, the pursuit of truth did not depend on institutions or dogmas, but on a direct connection with the divine. Their teachings challenged the authority of the early church, while offering an alternative and deeply introspective view on the meaning of life and the message of Christ. At the heart of Gnosticism was the idea that the material world was imperfect, a creation of a demiurge, a lower and fallible deity. In contrast, the spiritual realm was seen as pure and eternal, the true dwelling of the divine spark that resides in every human being. This dualism, which separates the physical world from the spiritual, shaped the entire Gnostic worldview, influencing its interpretation of Jesus' teachings. According to the Gnostics, Christ came into the world not only to redeem humanity, but to reveal a hidden knowledge that would free souls from the cycle of ignorance and material imprisonment. This knowledge was not something that could be conveyed through simple words, but a direct experience of inner transformation. In the Gnostic texts, Jesus often appears as a mystical guide, leading his followers on a path of spiritual discovery. One of the most well-known texts associated with Gnosticism is the Gospel of Thomas, which, as previously discussed, emphasizes the inner quest. In addition to it, the Gospel of Truth, found in the Nag Hammadi Library, presents a poetic view of the spiritual journey, describing ignorance as a kind of dream that prevents humanity from recognizing its true nature. According to this gospel, Jesus is the mediator who awakens souls from this sleep, leading them back to divine fullness. The Gnostics also believed in the existence of levels of spiritual knowledge. For them, not everyone was ready to receive the deepest truths. This idea of spiritual hierarchy was controversial, as it went against the notion that Christ's message should be universal. However, the Gnostics argued that only those who were willing to abandon prejudices and illusions could fully understand Jesus' message. Another intriguing text that reflects the Gnostic mysteries is the Gospel of Judas, which presents Judas Iscariot, traditionally seen as the betrayer of Christ, in a completely different light. In this gospel, Judas is portrayed as Jesus' closest disciple, the only one who understood his purpose and accepted to play the necessary role for the fulfillment of the divine plan. This narrative subverts the conventions of traditional Christian doctrine and exemplifies the audacity of Gnostic thought. The importance of Gnosticism in primitive spirituality is also evident in its practices. The Gnostics valued meditation, introspection, and rituals that symbolized the liberation of the soul from the material world. Many scholars believe that these practices echo the hidden teachings of Jesus, suggesting that he may have transmitted esoteric knowledge to a select group of disciples. However, Gnosticism faced fierce resistance from the early church. Its ideas directly challenged the centralized authority and the official interpretation of the Gospels. For the church leaders, the Gnostic emphasis on spiritual autonomy and individual knowledge was a threat to the unity and order they were trying to establish. As a result, Gnosticism was labeled as heresy, and its texts and communities were persecuted. Even so, the Gnostic legacy survived. Discoveries like the Nag Hammadi manuscripts have brought to light a wealth of texts that reveal the depth and complexity of this tradition. These works not only offer an alternative perspective on Jesus and his teachings, but also inspire a more personal and introspective approach to spirituality. Today, the Gnostic mysteries continue to resonate with those seeking a more direct connection with the divine. They remind us that the true spiritual quest is not an external journey, but a process of self-discovery. For the Gnostics, the key to spiritual awakening lay within each individual, waiting to be revealed through personal knowledge and experience. This transformative view of early Christianity opens up new possibilities for understanding Jesus and his message. In the next section, we will explore how historical and archaeological evidence, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library, reinforce the idea of hidden disciples and esoteric traditions associated with Christ. The mysteries of Jesus' hidden teachings and possible secret disciples find fascinating support in archaeological and historical discoveries that have transformed the understanding of early Christianity. Among these discoveries, the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Nag Hammadi Library hold a central place, revealing texts that offer clues about the diversity of beliefs and spiritual practices that coexisted in the early centuries of Christianity. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947 in the caves of Qumran, contain hundreds of texts that belong to a Jewish community known as the Essenes. These writings, which date from approximately 200 BC to 70 AD, include commentaries on biblical texts, community rules, and spiritual hymns. Although they do not directly mention Jesus or his disciples, the Dead Sea Scrolls reveal a worldview and practices that echo the teachings of Christ, such as the preparation for an imminent kingdom of God, spiritual purification, and an emphasis on moral righteousness. The parallels between the Essenes and the descriptions of Jesus and his followers in the Gospels suggest a potential connection. For example, the idea of a community united by the sharing of material goods, found in the Acts of the Apostles, resembles the Essene practices described in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Furthermore, the purification rituals through water, characteristic of the Essenes, may have influenced the baptism preached by John the Baptist, whom many believe to be associated with this community. Another key discovery is the Nag Hammadi library, found in 1945 in Egypt. These texts, written in Coptic and dated to the 4th century, contain a collection of Gnostic and apocryphal works, including the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and the Gospel of Mary. Unlike the Dead Sea Scrolls, which reflect a Jewish perspective, the Nag Hammadi texts reveal the diversity of early Christian thought and its connections with broader philosophical and spiritual currents. Among the Nag Hammadi texts, the Gospel of Thomas stands out as a record of secret sayings attributed to Jesus. Its emphasis on inner search and transcendence of the material world resonates with esoteric traditions attributed to hidden disciples. The Gospel of Philip, in turn, challenges doctrinal conventions by suggesting that Mary Magdalene played a prominent role among the disciples, receiving teachings that others did not fully understand. These texts also offer a fascinating insight into how early Christians dealt with the duality between the material and spiritual worlds. In Gnosticism, widely represented in the Nag Hammadi library, the physical world was seen as a prison created by a demiurge, while the true spiritual goal was to attain the knowledge that would free the soul and reconnect it with the divine. This emphasis on secret knowledge as the key to salvation reinforces the idea that certain teachings of Jesus might have been reserved for those prepared to understand them. The implications of these findings extend beyond the academic field. They challenge the traditional narrative about the formation of Christianity, revealing that the early followers of Jesus were not homogeneous in their beliefs or practices. Instead, there was a remarkable diversity of spiritual approaches, some of which were systematically suppressed as the Church consolidated its power. Other archaeological evidence, such as inscriptions and artifacts found in regions where early Christianity flourished, reinforce the idea of a rich and varied spirituality. For example, early Christian symbols found in Roman catacombs often combine images of Christ with mystical and philosophical elements from other traditions, suggesting a cultural and spiritual exchange between different communities. Furthermore, discoveries such as the Alexamenus graffito, a 2nd-century graffiti depicting Jesus on a cross with a donkey's head, illustrate how ideas about Christ varied widely and were often the subject of ridicule by those who did not understand or rejected certain interpretations of his message. These archaeological and historical findings also raise important questions about the transmission of Jesus' teachings. If there were hidden disciples who received deeper messages, how were these messages preserved? The apocryphal and Gnostic texts suggest that certain communities took on the responsibility of protecting these traditions, even at the risk of persecution. The survival of texts, such as those found in Nag Hammadi, is a testament to the effort of these communities to keep an alternative vision of Christianity alive. These documents were hidden by monks who feared the destruction of ideas they considered sacred. Their actions allow us today to explore a lesser-known side of Christian spirituality, broadening our understanding of Jesus and his message. By linking these archaeological findings with accounts of secret disciples and esoteric teachings, we begin to see a more comprehensive and complex picture of early Christianity. This story is one of diversity, conflict, and above all, a relentless pursuit of the divine. In the next part, we will explore how these ideas and traditions influence modern spirituality, connecting the past to the present in a transformative way. The esoteric traditions, apocryphal texts, and archaeological discoveries we have explored so far continue to resonate powerfully in modern spirituality. Although they have been suppressed for centuries, their echoes have persisted, offering an alternative and transformative perspective on Jesus' message and the meaning of faith. These ideas not only challenge the traditional narrative of Christianity, but also inspire a new generation of spiritual seekers to explore the depths of self-knowledge and divine connection. The central idea that the kingdom of God is within each individual is perhaps one of the most impactful messages from the Gnostic and apocryphal texts. In the contemporary world, This emphasis on inner search resonates with spiritual movements that promote meditation, mindfulness, and self-development. Many find in this approach an answer to the anxieties and existential emptiness of modern life, where rigid religious structures often fail to provide a sense of purpose or belonging. Furthermore, the role of Mary Magdalene as a guardian of hidden teachings provides a powerful symbol of empowerment and spiritual equality. Her figure challenges the patriarchal narratives that have dominated the history of Christianity, bringing to light the importance of female voices in spirituality. At a time when society seeks greater balance and inclusion, the story of Mary Magdalene serves as a reminder that spiritual leadership transcends gender barriers. Gnosticism, with its emphasis on inner knowledge and transcendence of the material world, also finds parallels in modern philosophies of spirituality. Practices such as consciousness exploration, the study of mystical traditions, and the search for personal meaning are largely influenced by ideas that date back to Gnostic traditions. Many of those seeking authentic spirituality today identify with the Gnostic view that spiritual truth is an individual path and cannot be fully contained by dogmas or institutions. The rediscovery of the Nag Hammadi texts and the Dead Sea Scrolls has also revived interest in a broader approach to the figure of Jesus. Instead of seeing him only as the founder of a religion, he is increasingly interpreted as a universal spiritual master, whose teachings transcend cultural and religious boundaries. This view offers a bridge between Christianity and other spiritual traditions, such as Buddhism, Sufism, and Eastern philosophies, promoting interfaith dialogue and mutual understanding. Furthermore, the notion of hidden teachings challenges the idea that spirituality should be completely transparent and accessible to all. Instead, it suggests that certain truths require maturity and effort to be understood. This doesn't imply elitism, but an emphasis on spiritual preparation as a prerequisite for enlightenment. For many, this approach reflects the reality that spiritual growth is an ongoing process, requiring dedication, reflection, and openness. Modern spirituality also benefits from historical and archaeological discoveries that have unearthed these forgotten traditions. Books, documentaries, and studies based on texts like the Gospel of Thomas or the Gospel of Mary are accessible to a wider audience, allowing people to explore these ideas on their own. This democratized access to esoteric knowledge is one of the greatest achievements of the contemporary era, breaking down barriers that previously restricted spiritual understanding. However, the impact of these traditions is not limited to the personal level. They also challenge religious institutions to rethink their role in the modern world. By confronting narratives that have been suppressed for centuries, many religious communities are beginning to embrace a more inclusive and pluralistic approach, recognizing the wealth of spiritual diversity present in the early centuries of Christianity. The hidden teachings of Jesus, when viewed in this light, are not just a historical curiosity, but a continuous source of inspiration and transformation. They invite us to explore the deepest dimensions of our spirituality, to question the narratives that have been presented to us, and to seek a more direct connection with the divine. This journey, although challenging, offers rewards that transcend the limitations of material life, bringing us closer to a fuller understanding of ourselves and the universe. Finally, the texts and ideas we have explored in this series represent not only a legacy from the past, but an invitation to the present. They call us to reflect on what it means to be truly spiritual in an increasingly complex and fragmented world. Whether through Gnosticism, the teachings of Mary Magdalene, or archaeological discoveries, the message remains clear. The path to enlightenment lies within each of us, waiting to be discovered. This connection between the past and the present is what makes the mysteries of Christ's hidden disciples so relevant today. They not only broaden our understanding of history, but also illuminate the path to a richer, more personal, and transformative spirituality. What we begin to explore here is merely the start of a journey that each individual must embark on for themselves. Now that we've explored the hidden secrets of Christ and the impact of these teachings on spirituality, we want to hear from you, Mind Unfettered. If you had the master key to access the deepest mysteries of existence, how would you use it? Leave in the comments how you would connect with this wisdom, or which hidden teaching resonated most with you. Your insight could inspire others on this spiritual journey. And don't stop here. In our next exploration, we'll dive into a topic that connects ancient mystical traditions with a universal power that is within everyone's reach. The secret code of the Tree of Life. Unlock the hidden power of Kabbalah. Click on the video that's on your screen and keep uncovering the secrets that can transform your life. We can't wait to meet you there, Mind Unfettered.